A 4-year-old street urchin pleads, "Mister, can I shine your shoes?" begging a millionaire for $1. But when he discovers the reason, he collapses. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The jarring ring of the alarm clock shattered the morning silence of the luxurious penthouse apartment. 30-year-old Alistair Davenport, a millionaire with the looks of a soap opera heartthrob and the swagger of a movie star, rubbed the sleep from his eyes before rising from his king-sized bed. His dark hair, perfectly coiffed, contrasted with the stubble that gave him a masculine, imposing air. Even just awakened, his presence commanded respect and admiration. It had been 2 years since he lost his wife, under circumstances he preferred not to recall, and since then his routine had been work, investments, and more work. His fortune, built through shrewd stock market plays and strategic real estate ventures, grew exponentially each month. His financial advisors constantly approached him with new opportunities to multiply his net worth, but he seemed to have lost the pleasure in all material achievements. He donned his impeccable Italian suit, adjusted his silk tie, and slipped into his genuine leather shoes, which cost more than many workers' annual salary. His appearance was always flawless, every detail carefully considered to convey power and success. The reflection in the mirror showed a man who had everything money could buy, but whose eyes revealed a profound emptiness that not all his wealth could fill. The walk to the office was part of his morning ritual. He preferred to walk the few blocks rather than use his chauffeured car, as these moments gave him the illusion of normalcy amidst the urban chaos of the great metropolis. The bustling streets teemed with hurried people, street vendors, and the constant noise of heavy traffic. It was during one of these routine walks that his life changed forever. A frail, almost inaudible voice caught his attention amidst the city noises. Looking down, he saw a 4-year-old girl who looked barely 2, so small and fragile she seemed like a broken doll, abandoned on the sidewalk. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, her torn clothes barely covered her thin body, and her bare feet showed calluses and wounds that spoke of long walks on the rough asphalt. "Please, mister," she murmured in a voice that barely escaped her throat, holding a rusty can full of black polish. "Can I shine your shoes? I just need a little money, please." The businessman stopped abruptly, surprised not only by the unexpected approach, but by the determination that shone in the child's large, sad eyes. For years he had ignored beggars and street vendors with the same coldness with which he conducted his multi-million-dollar deals. His heart had hardened after his wife's death, turning him into an even more ruthless version of himself. But something in those desperate eyes made him hesitate. The girl noticed his hesitation and quickly positioned herself at his feet, preparing her rudimentary shoe-shining materials. Her small hands trembled, whether from cold, hunger, or nervousness, as she tried to open the polished tin with tiny, weak fingers. The scene was as touching as it was disturbing. A child who should have been playing and attending school was there, on the dirty streets, trying to earn a few bucks to survive. "How much do you charge?" he asked, his voice sounding harsher than he intended. "Just a little, mister. Whatever you can give," she replied, already wiping the dirty cloth over the gleaming leather of his expensive shoes. Her movements were slow but careful, as if she feared damaging the shoes and losing the customer. The millionaire watched in silence as the girl worked with an impressive concentration for her age. She seemed to know every step of the process, applying the polish with precise movements and then buffing until the leather shone again. It was evident that it wasn't her first time doing this job. "Do you do this every day?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Every day, mister. Ever since I was even smaller," she replied without looking up from her work. "My auntie says I have to bring money home, or I don't get to eat." The word auntie sounded strange on her lips, laden with a sadness that a 4-year-old shouldn't know. The businessman felt a pang in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. His assistant always commented on his lack of compassion for the less fortunate, but at that moment, something inside him began to awaken. When she finished the service, he pulled a $50 bill from his wallet and handed it to the girl. Her eyes widened with surprise and gratitude, as if she had never seen so much money before. "Thank you, mister, thank you so much," she exclaimed, clutching the bill to her chest as if it were a treasure. "What's your name?" he asked, but the girl was already quickly packing up her materials, clearly anxious to leave. "I gotta go, mister." "Thank you anyway," she said, running along the sidewalk with surprising agility for someone so small and seemingly fragile. The millionaire stood there for a few seconds, watching the tiny figure disappear into the crowd. Something had changed within him in those few minutes. A crack had opened in his heart, armored by years of pain and emotional isolation. For the first time in a long time, he couldn't fully concentrate on his work for the rest of the day, his mind constantly returning to those sad eyes and the frail voice asking for just a little money. The next morning, the millionaire woke up earlier than usual. During the night, he had dreamed of those sad eyes and couldn't get the image of the child running along the sidewalk with her bare feet out of his mind. He dressed with the same care as always, but this time he chose a slightly different route to the office, passing exactly where he had found the girl the day before. She was there again, sitting in the same corner of the sidewalk, with the Polish can beside her and a piece of cardboard spread on the ground as protection against the cold concrete. She wore the same clothes as the day before, or perhaps they were others equally torn and dirty. When she saw him approaching, her eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and recognition. "You came back," she exclaimed, getting up quickly and grabbing her materials. "Do you stay here every day at the same time?" he asked, allowing her to position herself to shine his shoes again. "Yes, mister. Every day, real early, before the other kids get here. This is a good spot 'cause a lot of important people like you walk by," she replied, already working with the same dedication as the day before. The mention of other kids intrigued and disturbed him at the same time. How many children like her were scattered throughout the city, working when they should be playing or studying? Reality was beginning to reveal itself in a cruder way than he had ever noticed in all his years walking those streets. "What's your name?" he asked again, this time with more patience. She hesitated for a moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him. "People call me a lot of things, but my mama gave me a pretty name. But she's been gone a long time." "And your auntie? How is she with you?" The girl's body stiffened visibly, and she stopped polishing the shoe for a moment. She takes care of me, gives me a place to sleep and sometimes food, when I bring home enough money." The hesitant way she spoke revealed much more than her words. The millionaire observed her movements more carefully and noticed small bruises on her thin arms, marks that seemed to be from adult fingers that had squeezed too hard. His jaw clenched involuntarily. "Do you go to school?" he asked, although he already knew what the answer would be. "School's for kids who got real families," she replied with a bitterness too wise for her age. "I gotta work. Auntie says if you don't work, you don't deserve to eat." When she finished the service, he again pulled a generous bill from his wallet, this time a $100 bill. The girl's reaction was even more intense. She held the money with both hands, trembling with emotion. "You're real good to me," she murmured. "Nobody's ever been this good." "What's your real name?" he insisted, crouching down to be at her level. After a long pause, she whispered, "My mama used to call me Princess, but that was a long time ago. Now everybody just calls me Girl." The businessman's heart clenched even more. "What if I wanted to call you by a special name? Would you like that?" She nodded shyly, a small smile appearing on her cracked lips for the first time since they met. "Then I'll call you Little One." "Okay?" "Little One," she repeated, testing how it sounded. "I like it." During the rest of the week, the routine was repeated. Every day, at the same time, The millionaire passed by the spot and allowed little one to shine his shoes, always paying much more than the service was worth. Little by little, she opened up and told fragments of her story. He discovered that she woke up before 5 in the morning to get to the spot before the other working children. That sometimes she stayed on the street all day without eating anything, depending on the generosity of passers-by. That her auntie wasn't really a relative, but a woman who had taken her in when her mother disappeared almost 2 years ago. "Do you remember your mother?" he asked on a rainy Thursday, protecting the girl with his expensive umbrella while she worked. "A little," she replied, her eyes filling with tears. "She was pretty and smelled good. She used to sing me a song before I went to sleep. But one day she left and never came back. Auntie said she abandoned me because I was too much trouble." "And do you believe that?" Little one stopped what she was doing and looked him directly in the eyes. "I don't think my mama wanted to leave. I think something bad happened to her. But Auntie gets real mad when I talk about her, so I don't anymore." The millionaire felt a growing anger against this woman who was clearly mistreating the child. His discreet investigations through contacts at City Hall had already revealed that the auntie had a history of alcohol problems and had lost custody of her own children in suspicious circumstances years ago. "Little one, if I could help you in any way, what would you want?" She thought for a long time, biting her lower lip thoughtfully. "I really want to find my mama. There's a lady who sometimes comes by here and says she saw a woman who looks like me asking about a little girl in a place far from here, but I'll never have money to go look." "What place?" "A big hospital in a city that's far away. The lady said the woman was real sad and was asking about a little daughter she lost." "Maybe it's my mama, right?" The businessman's heart raced. A mental hospital. That would explain the sudden disappearance and the fact that the auntie had taken custody. His entrepreneurial mind was already drawing up plans to investigate, but he knew he had to be careful not to arouse suspicion. "And how much money would you need to go to that place?" "A lot of money, mister. More than I could save up in a long time. Auntie always takes almost everything I earn, says it's to pay for the food and the place where I sleep." At that moment, a middle-aged woman, with a disheveled appearance and a strong smell of alcohol, approached quickly. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she walked with the determination of someone looking for something specific. "There you are, you little tramp," she shouted, grabbing little one's arm roughly. "How long you been here?" "Where's the money you supposed to have made by now?" The child cringed in fear, instinctively trying to protect herself. "I got it, Auntie. It's here," she said, pulling out the bills she had received during the week. The woman snatched the money from the girl's hands and began to count it greedily. When she saw the amount, her expression became even crueler. "Where'd all this money come from? You lying to me, ain't you? Nobody pays this much to shine shoes." It was then that she noticed the presence of the millionaire, who was watching the scene with growing indignation. Her eyes widened as she realized the quality of his clothes, the expensive watch on his wrist, the entire aura of wealth that he exuded. The woman who claimed to be little one's auntie completely changed her demeanor upon realizing the millionaire's presence. Her calculating eyes quickly scanned the expensive clothes, the luxury watch, the elegant posture that betrayed someone accustomed to power and wealth. A false, servile smile spread across her face, marked by alcohol and bitterness. "Oh, sorry, mister," she said, abruptly releasing little one's arm and smoothing her own disheveled hair. "Didn't know my niece had such a distinguished customer. She's sometimes late and I get worried, you know how it is." The businessman watched the transformation with barely disguised disgust. The difference between how she treated the child when she thought she was alone and how she acted in the presence of someone with money revealed her true manipulative nature. "The girl provides excellent service," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "Always very polite and meticulous in her work. Oh, sure. I make sure to raise her right. Work dignifies a person, right? I've been teaching her that since she was little, she lied shamelessly, while counting and recounting the money she had snatched from little one's hands. The child remained silent, looking alternately at the ground and at the millionaire, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way her little body shrank whenever the woman moved. "And where do you live?" he asked, feigning casual interest. "Right near here, in a simple but honest little house. The girl has everything she needs, a roof, food when she behaves well, and I teach her how to get by in life. It's better than being thrown in the street like an animal, right?" The way she emphasized, "when she behaves well," made the businessman's blood boil. Every word confirmed his suspicions about the treatment little one received at home. "Well, I need to get to my appointment," he said, pulling a $200 bill from his wallet. "Little one did an excellent job today. This is the payment." The woman's eyes gleamed with covetousness at the sight of the money. She reached out to take the bill, but the millionaire held it firmly. "This payment is exclusively for the girl's work," he said, looking directly into the woman's eyes. "I hope she receives the fair value for her effort." Sure. She'll get it, don't worry. I just keep it so she doesn't lose it. You know how kids are distracted," she lied again, extending her hand more insistently. Reluctantly, he handed over the money, knowing that little one probably wouldn't see even a fraction of that amount. The woman quickly pocketed the bills and grabbed the girl's arm. "Let's go, girl. We gotta go home now. Thank you, mister, for the generosity. The girl will be here tomorrow at the same time. You can count on it." As they walked away, the millionaire heard the woman's harsh voice, whispering threats to little one. "I don't know how you got so much money at once, but if you're up to something, you'll see." That night, the businessman couldn't concentrate on anything. He cancelled 2 important meetings and spent hours surfing the internet, researching adoption laws, child protection systems, and psychiatric hospitals in the region. His fortune, built through stock market investments and strategic ventures, had never seemed so insignificant in the face of the powerlessness to help a child who clearly needed protection. The next day, he arrived earlier at the meeting point, but little one wasn't there. He waited for almost an hour, pacing nervously back and forth, until he finally saw her arriving. His heart clenched as he realized that she was limping slightly and had a purple bruise on her cheek. "Little one, what happened?" he asked, crouching down to examine the bruise. "I fell," she lied, averting her gaze. "I tripped at home and bumped my face." "That's not from a fall," he said softly. "Did someone hit you?" Tears began to form in the girl's eyes, but she shook her head vigorously. "I can't talk about these things, mister. Auntie said if I complain about her to anyone, much worse things will happen to me." The millionaire felt a controlled fury grow inside him. His hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "Little one, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. There are people in the world whose job is to protect children like you. If someone is hurting you, that's not right. It's never right. But she said nobody would believe me, that I'm just a dirty street girl, and that everyone would think I was lying to make trouble. I believe you," he said firmly, "and I promise I'm going to find a way to help you." During the following days, he discreetly hired a private investigator to find out more about little one's situation. The information he received was devastating. The woman who was posing as an aunt had no relation to the girl and had taken custody of her in a dubious way when the biological mother disappeared. She had a history of neglect with her own children, who had been removed from her custody years ago for mistreatment before the tragedy that took them. The investigator also discovered hospital records that confirmed the suspicions about the biological mother. She had been admitted to a psychiatric clinic after a nervous breakdown, but the record showed that she had been discharged a few months ago. Her current whereabouts were unknown, but there were reports of a woman matching her description, asking about a child in hospitals in the area. Armed with this information, the millionaire carefully began to plan his next steps. He knew that a direct approach could put little one in even more danger, but he couldn't stand by and watch the child suffer. It was on a rainy Tuesday that everything changed. Little one arrived at the meeting spot later than usual, and he immediately noticed that something was different. She seemed more nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she were being followed. "Auntie found out about the money," she whispered while working on his shoes. "She searched all my things looking for where I was hiding it. She found the little bit of change I'd saved and got real mad." "What did she do?" "She locked me in the basement last night. Said I'm a liar and a thief, that nobody pays that much money just to shine shoes. Thinks I'm stealing from the customers." The millionaire took a deep breath, trying to control the anger he felt. "Little one, I need to ask you a very important question. If I told you I could help you look for your mama, would you be up for it?" Her eyes lit up as he'd never seen before. "Would you really do that?" "I would, but it would have to be without your auntie knowing, at least at first." "I'd do anything to find my mama," she said with a determination that contrasted with her fragile appearance. "Anything at all." It was at that moment that an unexpected discovery came to light. The investigator had found records showing that little one's mother was no longer in the psychiatric hospital, but had been transferred to an outpatient rehabilitation program in the city itself. She was living in a halfway house just a few miles away, working as a cleaning assistant and participating in regular therapy sessions. Even more surprising was the discovery that the woman had contacted the authorities several times in recent months, trying to regain custody of her daughter. But her attempts had been blocked by allegations that she didn't have the financial or psychological capacity to care for a child. The last piece of the puzzle was the most shocking. The documents showed that little one's auntie was receiving substantial government assistance earmarked for the child's care, money that clearly wasn't being used for the girl's well-being. The revelation about the government assistance that the fake auntie was receiving completely changed the millionaire's perspective on the situation. During the night, he stayed awake analyzing all the documents his investigator had obtained, putting together an increasingly clear picture of the systematic exploitation that little one was suffering. The woman not only mistreated the child, but profited from her suffering, receiving public money intended for the girl's care while forcing her to work on the streets. The next morning, he arrived at the meeting spot with renewed determination. Little one was there as always, but this time he noticed details he had ignored before. Her clothes weren't just old and torn. They were inadequate for the cold weather that was beginning to set in the great metropolis. Her lips were blue from the cold, and she was shivering as she organized her work materials. "Little one, you're cold," he observed, taking off his own wool coat and placing it over the girl's thin shoulders. "You don't have to, mister." "I can handle it," she protested weakly, but snuggled into the warm coat with obvious relief. "Everyone needs care, especially children," he said softly. "Have you had breakfast today?" She shook her head negatively, focusing on the work of shining the shoes to avoid his gaze. He realized that her hands were trembling not only from cold, but also from hunger. "How about after you finish, we go get something for you to eat?" Little one's eyes widened with surprise and fear. "Auntie said I can't go anywhere with strangers. She gets real mad if I'm late getting back home. What if it was just to the bakery on the corner? You can see it from here. It's not far." After a visible internal hesitation, she agreed. Minutes later, they were sitting at a small table in the bakery, while little one devoured a sweet roll and drank hot chocolate as if it were the most delicious meal in the world. The millionaire watched, touched. How simple gestures could bring so much joy to someone who had so little. "Little one, can I tell you a secret?" he said, leaning forward. She nodded, still chewing the roll with relish. "I found out where your mama is." The girl almost choked on the food, her eyes filled with tears instantly, a mixture of hope and disbelief shining in them. "Is it true? Where is she? Is she okay?" She's in a house not far from here, recovering and trying to get better so she can take care of you again." Tears began to stream down little one's dirty face. "She didn't abandon me then? She really wants me back? Your mother never abandoned you. She got sick, very sick, and needed to go to a place where she could heal, but she never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you. Can I see her? Please, mister, can I see my mama?" The millionaire's heart broke at the despair in the child's voice. "It's a little complicated, little one. Your auntie has legal guardianship over you, so I need to find a way to do this without causing problems." "She's not my real auntie," little one revealed for the first time. "I know she's not. My mama never talked about her before she got sick. Auntie showed up only after my mama was hospitalized and said she was going to take care of me until she came back." This confirmation was crucial to the businessman's plans. If the woman had no real relationship with little one, it would be easier to legally challenge her guardianship. "Little one, if I arranged for you to see your mama, would you trust me?" "I trust you more than anyone in the world," she replied without hesitation. At that moment, the millionaire's cell phone rang. It was his private investigator with urgent news. "I found the girl's mother," said the voice on the other end of the line. "She's working as a cleaner at the municipal hospital and lives in a boarding house for women in recovery. I got a picture of her. It's amazing how much the child looks like her." "Send me the picture by text," asked the businessman, hanging up quickly. When the image arrived, he showed it discreetly to little one. The girl's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She began to cry copiously, pointing at the phone screen. "It's her! It's my mama! I knew she hadn't abandoned me!" She sobbed between tears of joy and relief. The millionaire felt a profound emotion taking over his chest. For 2 years, since his wife's departure, he had closed himself off to any kind of feeling, focusing only on multiplying his fortune through stock investments and financial applications. But that child had managed to awaken in him something he thought he had lost forever, the ability to genuinely care about the well-being of another person. "We're going to find a way to reunite you two," he promised. "But I need you to help me with something very important." "Anything, mister. I need to know exactly how your auntie treats you at home. I know it's hard to talk about it, but it's important for me to be able to help you for real." Little one hesitated, looking around nervously. When she finally began to speak, her voice was almost a whisper. "She makes me sleep in the basement, on an old, wet mattress. Only gives me food when I bring home enough money from the street. If I don't bring enough, I don't get dinner. Sometimes she drinks some bottles and gets real mad, yells at me and hurts me." "How does she hurt you?" "She pinches me real hard, pulls my hair, and once pushed me down the stairs. That's why I was limping a few days ago." Each word was like a stab in the millionaire's heart. His wealth, his dividends, all his net worth seemed insignificant in the face of the suffering of that innocent child. "Little one, do you know why she does this to you? She says it's my fault her children died, says I brought bad luck to the family, and that's why bad things happened. But I don't really understand, 'cause I was real little when that happened." The investigator had already reported this part of the story. The woman had lost her 2 children in a car accident a few years ago and, unable to cope with the grief, developed severe problems with alcohol and aggressive behavior. Taking care of little one had been just an opportunity to receive government assistance, but her disturbed mind transferred all the blame and anger to the innocent child. "Little one, nothing that happened is your fault. You're just a child and you deserve to be loved and protected. Sometimes I dream that my mama comes back and takes me away from that place," she confessed. "But when I wake up, everything stays the same. What if I told you that dream could come true very soon?" Little one's eyes sparkled with cautious hope. "Would you really be able to make that happen?" "I'm going to do everything in my power," promised the millionaire. "But I need you to be very brave and help me with a few more things." That afternoon, after accompanying little one back to the place where she worked, the businessman went to the municipal hospital. His impeccable appearance and confident demeanor opened doors easily, and he was soon talking to the cleaning supervisor about one of the employees. "The woman you're looking for?" "Oh, yes. She's one of our best employees," said the supervisor. "Very dedicated, never misses work. But she always seems sad, you know. Sometimes I see her crying during her break." "Has she ever mentioned anything about family?" "She always talks about a little daughter who was separated from her. Says that one day she'll be able to prove that she's okay and can take care of the girl again. It's heartbreaking, you know. A mother separated from her child is one of the saddest things in the world." The millionaire felt his determination strengthen even further. That night, he made a decision that would change not only little one's life, but also his own. He would use all his influence, all his financial resources, and all his determination to reunite mother and daughter, no matter the obstacles he encountered along the way. The millionaire's plan began to take shape during the early hours of the morning. He spent hours in his private office, surrounded by legal documents and making calls to lawyers specializing in family law. His fortune, accumulated through years of shrewd investments in the stock market and applications in real estate funds, would finally have a purpose that went beyond multiplying his net worth. The next morning, he arrived at the meeting point with little one, carrying a discreet bag. Inside were new clothes suitable for the weather, a warm coat, shoes of the right size, and some nutritious snacks. "This is for me?" she asked, incredulous, upon seeing the clean and beautiful clothes. "For you," he confirmed. "Every child deserves to have adequate clothing and enough food." Little one held the pieces with reverent care, as if they were made of precious material. "But Auntie will ask where I got these things. She always suspects when I show up with anything new." "Then let's keep them in a safe place for now," he suggested. "I know a place where you can change clothes and eat properly before we meet." He had discreetly rented a small commercial office a few blocks away, a neutral location where they could meet without arousing suspicion. It was a small investment compared to his wealth, but it represented much more. It was the first concrete step towards changing little one's life. During the following days, the routine was established. Little one continued to work on the street so as not to arouse the false auntie's suspicions, but now she had a safe haven where she could clean herself, eat properly, and wear decent clothes, even if only for a few hours. It was during one of these meetings that the millionaire realized something extraordinary. When well-fed and properly dressed, little one transformed completely. Her natural intelligence shone. She asked insightful questions about the world around her, and she demonstrated a thirst for knowledge that had been suffocated by misery and neglect. "Little one, would you like to learn to read?" he asked one afternoon. "Really read, like important people do." Her eyes lit up with pure curiosity. "Exactly like important people do." In the days that followed, the businessman discovered that he had an unexpected ability to teach. Little one absorbed each lesson like a sponge, learning the letters with a speed that impressed him. In just 1 week, she was already able to form simple words, and in 2 weeks she was reading basic sentences. But it was during one of these improvised lessons that the first major complication arose. The false auntie had noticed that little one was different, more cheerful, less subservient, and especially less desperate for food. Her alcoholic paranoia made her suspect that the girl was hiding something. "Where have you been going after work?" she confronted one morning, holding little one by the shoulders hard enough to leave marks. "Nowhere, Auntie. I just keep working on the streets until it gets dark," little one lied, but her voice trembled with nervousness. "You're lying to me. I know you are. Yesterday you came home less dirty than usual, and you smell different too, like you took a bath somewhere." The situation became even more complicated when the woman decided to follow the girl discreetly. Hidden behind parked cars and lampposts, she watched the daily meeting between little one and the millionaire. She saw the exchange of money, saw how he treated the child with kindness, and especially saw the way little one smiled in his presence. To a mind disturbed by alcohol and resentment, that scene took on distorted proportions. In her paranoia, she began to imagine that she was being deceived, that there was some scheme behind those meetings. The following night, she confronted little one more violently than ever. "I saw you with that rich man today. What lies have you been telling him? What play are you putting on to get money?" "I didn't lie anything, Auntie. He just pays well for shining shoes," little one protested, trying to protect herself from the slaps that began to rain down. "Nobody pays that much money just to shine shoes. You're up to something, you little tramp. You're making up lies about me, aren't you?" The aggressions intensified, and for the first time, little one arrived at the meeting point with marks that were too visible to hide. Her face was swollen on one side, there were scratches on her arms, and she could barely raise her right arm. The millionaire felt a fury like he had never experienced in his life. All his years of training in emotional control in business disappeared in the face of that flagrant injustice. "Did she do this to you?" he asked, his voice controlled but dangerous. Little one just nodded, beginning to cry silently. "She found out about our meetings. Thinks I'm lying to you to get money. Little one, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. Tonight, you're not going back to that house. But I have to go back. If I don't go back, she'll get even madder." "No, you don't have to go back. I have a plan, but I need you to trust me completely." That afternoon, the millionaire put into action the riskiest phase of his plan. Using his contacts in the legal field and his financial influence, he had obtained a temporary court order to investigate little one's living conditions. But he knew that legal bureaucracy could take weeks or months, time that the child didn't have. Therefore, he decided to take a more direct action. He took little one directly to the municipal hospital where her mother worked. The plan was simple: reunite mother and daughter, document the meeting, and use it as evidence of the biological mother's ability to care for the child. When they arrived at the hospital, little one was nervous and excited at the same time. She had dreamed of this moment for months, but now that it was really happening, she felt a mixture of hope and fear. The cleaning supervisor directed them to the women's locker room, where little one's mother was changing out of her uniform after her work shift. She was a young woman, of fragile appearance, but with determined eyes that looked impressively like her daughter's. When she turned around and saw little one, the world seemed to stop. "My daughter," she whispered, her hands trembling as she bent down to be at the girl's level. "My little princess." "Mama!" was all little one could say before running into her mother's arms. The hug between the two was so intense and emotional that it brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. Mother and daughter clung to each other as if they feared someone would separate them again. "I've looked for you for so long," cried the mother. "I knew you were alive. I knew that one day we would meet again. Auntie said you had abandoned me, but I always knew that wasn't true," replied little one, her voice muffled against her mother's chest. It was in that moment of pure joy that the most serious complication arose. The false auntie had followed the millionaire to the hospital and was now standing at the entrance to the locker room, watching the scene with an expression of uncontrollable fury. "I knew it," she shouted, drawing the attention of all the hospital employees. "I knew you were plotting something behind my back." The hospital security was called, and in a matter of minutes, the situation turned into a legal chaos. The false auntie claimed kidnapping. The millionaire insisted that he was just reuniting a family, and little one's mother panicked upon realizing that she could lose her daughter again. But it was in that moment of apparent defeat that an unexpected revelation changed everything. The hospital supervisor, who had observed the entire scene, approached with a document in her hands. The hospital supervisor approached the group with an official document in her hands, her serious expression indicating that she had important information to share. The document had arrived that morning through official channels. the result of the investigation that the millionaire had requested through his lawyers. "Ma'am," he addressed the false auntie, "I need to inform you that your temporary guardianship of this child has been officially challenged. This document shows that you have no blood relation to the minor and that you assumed her custody through questionable procedures." The woman paled visibly, her hands trembling with nervousness and anger. "That's a lie. I took care of this girl when nobody else wanted her. She was abandoned." "The records show that the biological mother never officially relinquished custody," continued the supervisor, showing the papers. "She was hospitalized for medical treatment. She had not abandoned the child. Furthermore, there is evidence that you have been receiving government assistance earmarked for the care of the minor without using those resources appropriately." The revelation hit the false auntie like a ton of bricks. All her authority, built through intimidation and lies, began to crumble before the documented evidence. The millionaire watched the scene with controlled satisfaction, knowing that his investments in legal investigation were finally bearing fruit. "I can explain all this." The woman tried to defend herself, but her voice no longer had the same conviction. "This girl was a lot of trouble. I deserved to receive something in return for taking care of her." "Taking care of her?" intervened little one's mother, still hugging her daughter. "Look at how she is, skinny, hurt, scared. That's not taking care of a child." It was at that moment that little one, gathering all her childish courage, decided to speak for the first time about her sufferings in front of official witnesses. "She beat me every day," she said in a small but firm voice. "Made me sleep in the wet basement, only gave me food when I brought a lot of money from the street. And she always said that my mama wasn't coming back because she didn't want me anymore." The child's words echoed in the silence of the locker room, causing a profound impact on everyone present. Several hospital employees approached, offering silent support to that family that was reuniting in such dramatic circumstances. The supervisor made some quick notes and turned to the millionaire. "Sir, from what I understand, you were the one who initiated this investigation." "I was," he confirmed. "This child works on the streets every day, clearly in a situation of exploitation. I couldn't stand by and watch that happen." "And what is your specific interest in the case? Are you related to the family?" The businessman hesitated for a moment. How to explain that a 4-year-old girl had awakened in him feelings that he thought he had lost forever? That his dividends and stock investments had lost all meaning in the face of the suffering of an innocent child? "I'm not a relative," he answered honestly, "but I believe that every child deserves protection and proper care. I have the financial resources to help, and I felt it was my moral obligation to do something." At that moment, the false auntie exploded in a last desperate attempt to maintain control over the situation. "You don't understand anything," she shouted. "I saved this girl from the street. Her mother is crazy. She was hospitalized because she couldn't take care of anyone. How can you give a child to a lunatic?" "I'm not crazy," retorted little one's mother with surprising firmness. "I was sick, but I recovered. I did treatment. I take my medication correctly. I work every day. I can prove that I'm okay." The supervisor consulted other documents she had brought. "In fact, the most recent medical reports indicate that the lady is stable and fit to resume her maternal responsibilities, provided she maintains regular medical follow-up." The legal battle that followed lasted several hours. Lawyers were called, documents were analyzed, and witnesses gave testimony. Throughout all this time, little one remained clinging to her mother as if she feared that someone might separate them again. The millionaire used all his influence and resources to expedite the bureaucratic processes. His private lawyers worked together with the legal representatives of the hospital to ensure that all procedures were followed correctly. But it was during this tense wait that an even more disturbing discovery came to light. The businessman's private investigator had found evidence that the false auntie wasn't just neglecting little one, she was using the child in a broader scheme of exploitation. There are records that she has assumed irregular guardianship of other children in the past, reported the investigator by telephone, always claiming to be a distant relative or temporary guardian. At least 3 similar cases in the last 5 years. What happened to those other children? Asked the millionaire, feeling a chill in his stomach. One was removed by social services after allegations of abuse. Another disappeared from the records, probably ran away. The third, well, she's been in a children's psychiatric hospital for 2 years. The magnitude of what he had discovered made the businessman realize that he wasn't just dealing with an isolated situation of neglect, but with a systematic pattern of child abuse. His fortune, built through careful applications and strategic investments, had never felt as important as it did at that moment. Not for the monetary value, but for the power it gave him to combat injustice. When this information was presented to the authorities, the false auntie situation became drastically complicated. It was no longer just a custody dispute, but a criminal investigation into systematic child exploitation. "You need to come with us to give explanations," said the hospital security officer, who had become the improvised representative of the authorities until the arrival of the specialized team. The woman tried one last desperate play. "You're going to regret this. This girl is going to be a lot of trouble for you. She's good for nothing. She's problematic. She doesn't know how to behave." "She's not problematic," intervened the millionaire firmly. "She's an intelligent and courageous child who has survived impossible circumstances. Any problems she may have are a direct result of the abuse she has suffered." It was at that moment that little one let go of her mother's hand for the first time in hours and walked up to the millionaire. Her big expressive eyes looked at him with a gratitude that needed no words. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing in me when nobody else did." The businessman knelt down to be at her level, and for the first time since the loss of his wife, felt tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for teaching me that there are still things more important than money in this world." While the false auntie was being taken away to give explanations, mother and daughter hugged each other again, finally free to rebuild the relationship that had been brutally interrupted. But both knew that the man who made this reunion possible would forever be an important part of their lives. The supervisor approached the group with a tired but hopeful smile. "Well, it seems we have a lot of work ahead to regularize this whole situation. But the important thing is that this family can finally be together." However, even amidst the joy of the reunion, new challenges began to emerge. Little one's mother lived in a modest boarding house, earned little as a cleaning assistant, and still needed to prove her ability to adequately care for her daughter. The legal bureaucracy would be complex, and there were practical issues that needed to be resolved quickly. But the millionaire was already thinking several steps ahead, planning how to use his resources to ensure that mother and daughter had not only a reunion, but a real chance to build a dignified life together. The weeks following the reunion were a period of complex and emotionally intense adaptation for everyone involved. The millionaire had used part of his assets to rent a modest but comfortable apartment for little one's mother, ensuring that she had dignified conditions to receive her daughter back. His investments in the stock market and applications in real estate funds had never been directed to something so personally significant. Little one still showed evident signs of the trauma she had suffered. She woke up screaming during the night, had difficulty eating without supervision, and showed a constant fear of being abandoned again. Her mother, in turn, struggled with the guilt of not having been able to protect her daughter, and with the responsibility of rebuilding a relationship that had been brutally interrupted. "She doesn't fully recognize me yet," confessed the mother to the millionaire during one of the regular meetings that he made a point of maintaining. "It's like I'm a kind stranger, not her mother." "That's normal after so much separation and trauma," he reassured her. "The important thing is that you have time together now." But the challenges were greater than anyone had anticipated. Little one's mother, despite being stable in her psychiatric treatment, still faced severe financial limitations. Her salary as a cleaning assistant barely covered basic expenses, even with the businessman's help for the rent. It was during one of these conversations that an unexpected discovery changed the whole dynamic of the situation. Little One's mother, leafing through some old documents that she had recovered from her personal belongings, found a photo that made her face pale. "I know this man," she murmured, showing the image to the millionaire. "He works at the hospital where I was hospitalized." The businessman examined the photograph carefully. It was an image of himself, taken about 3 years ago, during a visit he had made to the municipal psychiatric hospital as part of a social responsibility program of his company. "Do you remember me from there?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes, I remember. You were visiting the patients, talking to the families. It was a very difficult time for me, but I remember because you were one of the few people who treated me with dignity in that place." The revelation created an unexpected connection between them, as if fate had conspired to bring their lives together in a deeper way than anyone had imagined. The millionaire vaguely remembered that visit. It had been a corporate obligation that he had fulfilled without much enthusiasm, part of a corporate image strategy. "I didn't remember you specifically," he admitted honestly, "but now I understand why Little One seemed familiar to me from the first meeting. You have the same expressive eyes." During the following days, this discovery subtly changed the dynamic of the relationship between them. They were no longer just a rich benefactor and a mother in need. They were people whose paths had crossed before, united now by a common purpose. But it was precisely when things seemed to be stabilizing that a new complication arose. The investigation into the false auntie's activities had revealed irregularities in the government assistance she received, but it also brought up questions about the legality of Little One's current guardianship. A strict and bureaucratic social worker was assigned to assess the child's living conditions, and his first impressions were not positive. "The mother is still in psychiatric treatment, has limited resources, and the child shows clear signs of severe trauma," he reported in an official meeting. "Perhaps it would be better to consider a more stable foster family." The suggestion of separating mother and daughter again devastated both. Little One regressed behaviorally, returning to have constant nightmares and refusing to talk to strangers. Her mother entered a state of anxiety that threatened to compromise her progress in treatment. "They can't do this to us again," the mother pleaded to the millionaire. "Not after everything we've been through to be together." It was at that moment that the businessman made a decision that surprised even his most experienced lawyers. He offered to be Little One's temporary legal guardian, guaranteeing financial and emotional stability while the mother completed her recovery and stabilization. "Would you do that for us?" asked the mother, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "I would," he replied without hesitation, "but with one condition. You will continue to be Little One's mother in every sense." "I would just be a temporary legal guardian." The proposal created an unprecedented situation that required complex legal negotiations. The millionaire used all his influence and resources to structure an agreement that protected Little One's interests while respecting the bond between mother and daughter. During this process, something unexpected happened. Little One began to see the businessman not just as a benefactor, but as a father figure who had been absent from her life since always. She had never known her biological father, and the millionaire filled that void in a natural and loving way. "Can I call you Daddy?" she asked one afternoon while they were playing in the small garden of the apartment he had provided. The question hit the businessman hard. He had never had children with his deceased wife, and the possibility of becoming a father had seemed impossible after her loss. But there was a brave and intelligent child offering him a chance of fatherhood that he had never sought, but now deeply desired. "If your mother agrees, I would be very honored," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. The conversation with little one's mother about this possibility was delicate and charged with meaning. "I see how she looks at you," she said. "It's the first time I've seen my daughter completely trust a man, and I also trust you. This wouldn't change anything between you two," he assured her. "I don't want to replace you in her life. I want to complement, to help give her the complete family she deserves." This is how a situation born out of the need to protect a child in danger evolved into something much deeper: the formation of an unconventional but genuinely loving family. However, there were still significant obstacles to overcome. The social worker maintained his reservations about the arrangement, arguing that a traumatized child needed traditional stability, not family experiments. "This type of situation can confuse the girl even further," he argued in a tense meeting. "She needs clarity about who her authority figures are." "With all due respect," replied the millionaire, "this girl spent months being abused by someone who claimed to be her legal guardian. Now she has a mother who loves her and a guardian who has the resources to guarantee her education and well-being. Where is the confusion in that?" The bureaucratic battle intensified, but the businessman was determined to use all his resources, financial, legal, and influential, to protect the family he had helped to form. His investments in stocks and his net worth accumulated over the years finally had a purpose that went beyond the mere accumulation of wealth. During this tense period, little one demonstrated a surprising maturity for her 4 years. In one of the administrative hearings, she asked to speak directly to the social worker. "I know you want to help me," she said in her small but firm voice, "but I already have a family now. I have my mother, who loves me, and my adoptive daddy, who takes care of both of us. Please don't take them away from me again." The child's sincerity and clarity impressed everyone present, including the most resistant social worker. It was evident that, despite all the trauma suffered, little one had found emotional stability in the new family configuration. 3 months after the hearing, when it seemed that they had finally achieved family stability, a devastating discovery shook all the structures that they had built so carefully. The millionaire's private investigator brought information that completely changed the course of the story. "I found something you need to know about little one's mother," he said, his voice full of hesitation. "There are medical records that were omitted during this whole process." The businessman felt a chill in his stomach. "What kind of records?" "She wasn't just hospitalized for postpartum depression, as everyone believed. There is evidence that she suffered a severe psychotic episode that resulted in a very dangerous situation for her own daughter." The documents that the investigator presented were disturbing. Detailed medical reports described an incident where little one's mother, during a severe crisis, had placed her daughter at real risk of serious injury. It had not been a simple depression, but a psychotic break that had required emergency hospitalization. "Why didn't this information come up before?" asked the millionaire, flipping through the papers with growing concern. "It seems there was an error in the hospital's filing system. These records were incorrectly classified, lost among thousands of other cases." The revelation called into question everything that had been built in recent months. If this information came to the attention of the social worker or the competent authorities, little one's guardianship would be immediately questioned, and this time on much more solid grounds. But there was something even more disturbing in the documents. The dates of the reports did not coincide with the version that little one's mother had told about her hospitalization. According to the medical records, she had been hospitalized not once, but 3 times over 2 years, always after episodes related to caring for her daughter. The millionaire spent the entire night analyzing the information, trying to understand how he had become so deeply involved in a situation that was now proving to be much more complex than he had imagined. His investments in bitcoins and his applications in real estate funds seemed trivial issues in the face of the responsibility he had assumed. The next morning he made a difficult decision. He needed to confront little one's mother with these findings, even knowing that this could destroy the fragile stability they had managed to build. "I need to talk to you about something very serious," Alistair said when they met in the luxurious penthouse apartment he had rented for them. Little one was playing in her room, drawing colourful pictures that now depicted happy families instead of sad birds. Her mother immediately noticed the tension on the millionaire's face. "It's about my past, isn't it?" she asked, her voice already revealing that she knew this moment would eventually come. "I found the complete medical records of your hospitalizations." Her face drained of all colour. For a long moment, they remained in silence, the weight of the truth hanging between them like a dark cloud. "I didn't lie intentionally," she began, her hands trembling. "I really don't remember everything that happened during the crises. It's like it was someone else doing those things. Do you remember what you did to little one?" Tears began to stream down her face. "Fragments. I remember being very confused, thinking she was in danger because of things that only existed in my head. I remember almost—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. The medical reports were clear about the severity of what had happened. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" "Because I knew that if you knew, you would never have helped me get my daughter back, and I was desperate to have her back. In those months of treatment, all that kept me alive was the hope of seeing her again." Alistair sat down heavily in a chair, processing the implications of the situation. He had used his fortune and influence to reunite a family, but now he was discovering that he might have put little one in a potentially dangerous situation. "Do you still have these episodes?" "Not since I started proper treatment. The doctors say that with the right medication and regular monitoring, the chances of relapse are minimal, but I understand if you want to walk away from all this." At that moment, little one appeared in the doorway of her room, holding up her latest drawing. It was a picture of the three of them together, with a large heart encompassing the whole drawn family. "Look what I made," she exclaimed cheerfully, oblivious to the tension in the room. "It's our family!" The child's innocence contrasted brutally with the complexity of the situation the adults were facing. Alistair looked at that little girl who had learned to trust again, who had begun to smile and dream of the future, and he felt the weight of the responsibility he had assumed. "Little one," he said softly, "can you play a little more in your room? Mommy and I need to finish an important conversation." When they were alone again, little one's mother made a proposal that surprised the businessman. "I'm going to turn myself in to the authorities," she said with sudden determination. "I'm going to tell the whole truth about my past and accept the consequences. But I ask only one thing. Don't let them take little one to an orphanage. If you really care about her, take full custody." "I don't want your daughter," he replied immediately. "I want to help you two stay together. But if the authorities find out about my medical history, then we'll make sure you stick to the treatment rigorously. I'll hire the best private psychiatrists, specialized therapists, anything that's needed." The conversation was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of the social worker, who appeared for a routine visit. His serious expression indicated that he too had discovered something disturbing. "I need to talk to you about some irregularities we found in the records," he said, entering the apartment with a voluminous file under his arm. Alistair and little one's mother exchanged a tense look, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived sooner than they expected. "What kind of irregularities?" Alistair asked, trying to keep his voice controlled. "Medical records that were not presented during the evaluation process. Information about the mother's psychiatric hospitalization that is concerning." Little one, sensing the change in the environment, came out of her room and approached Alistair, gripping his hand tightly. Instinctively, she knew that something was again threatening her family's stability. "There are also other issues," the social worker continued. "We received an anonymous complaint alleging that you have concealed important information from the authorities. This is very serious." The businessman felt his jaw tighten. "What kind of complaint?" "Someone claimed that you conspired to conceal the mother's psychiatric history and that the child may be at risk again." At that moment, everyone realized that someone was actively working to destroy the family they had built. But who? And why? The answer came in the form of a familiar figure appearing at the apartment door. Little one's fake auntie, who was supposed to be answering for her actions in legal proceedings, was there with a vindictive smile on her face. "Surprise," she said sarcastically. "You didn't think I'd stay quiet after everything you put me through, did you?" Alistair immediately realized that they had underestimated the woman's determination to cause trouble. She had not only passively cooperated with the investigations, she had been planning a revenge that threatened to destroy everything they had built. The presence of the false auntie at the apartment door instantly transformed the environment into an arena of palpable tension. She had changed her appearance. She was neater, sober, and with an expression of calculated determination that indicated she had not come there on impulse. "How did you get out?" Alistair asked, instinctively positioning himself between her and little one. "I got out because I didn't commit any crime," she replied with a bitter smile. "Caring for an abandoned child isn't a crime. Besides, I discovered some very interesting things about you during that time." The social worker watched the scene with growing interest, his suspicions about the situation intensifying. The woman's arrival at the exact moment of his official visit seemed conveniently orchestrated. "Madam," he addressed the fake auntie, "are you the one who had previous custody of this child?" "Exactly, and I can tell you a lot about this perfect family they've built," she said, entering the apartment uninvited. "For example, do you know that she pointed to little one's mother, almost killed her own daughter during a psychotic break?" The accusation echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Little one began to cry, not fully understanding what was happening, but realizing that her safety was again threatened. "That's not true," murmured little one's mother, but her weak voice convinced no one. "It's not true?" The fake auntie laughed cruelly. "Then explain why you were hospitalized 3 times in 2 years. Explain why the doctors considered you a danger to your own daughter." The social worker made rapid notes, his expression becoming increasingly serious. "These are very serious allegations. I need to immediately verify all medical records." It was at this moment that the fake auntie revealed her true strategy. "I didn't do all this out of malice," she said, assuming a tone of an unjustly victimized woman. "When I took care of this girl, it was because she was really in danger. But now you want to paint me as the villain of the story." "You abused little one," Alistair accused. "She came to our meetings with bruises, malnourished, terrified." "I did what I could with the resources I had," she defended herself. "I'm not rich like you. I can't buy penthouse apartments and hire expensive lawyers. I did the best I could in an impossible situation." The manipulation was skillful and calculated. She was redirecting the narrative, transforming herself from abuser into unjustly mistreated caregiver, while painting Alistair as a rich man who used his money to manipulate the system. "And there's another thing," she continued, looking directly at the businessman. "Do you really think it's normal for a single man to be so interested in an unknown child?" "What kind of interest is that?" The insinuation was like a slap in the face. The social worker raised his eyes from his notes, his expression revealing that the seed of suspicion had been planted. "Sir," said the social worker, "I will need you to submit to a complete psychological evaluation before we proceed with any custody arrangement." "This is ridiculous," Alistair exploded. "My only motivation has always been the well-being of this child." "That's what they all say," the fake auntie murmured maliciously. Little one, who had remained quiet throughout the discussion, finally found her voice. "She's lying," she shouted, with all the strength her small lungs would allow. "She beat me every day. She left me hungry. Daddy and Mommy never hurt me." "You see," said the fake auntie, pointing to the child. "She's already confused about who her real family is. This is not healthy for her development." The social worker made more notes, clearly influenced by the arguments presented. "I will need to remove the child temporarily, while all these issues are investigated." "No!" Little one screamed, running into Alistair's arms. "I don't want to go away. Please don't take me." The scene was heartbreaking, but the fake auntie seemed to be winning the psychological battle. She had managed to plant enough doubts about everyone involved to justify official intervention. It was at this critical moment that an unexpected twist changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Alistair's private investigator arrived at the apartment with urgent documents in his hands. "You've arrived at the right time," the businessman said, hopeful that they were good news. "I found something very important about her," the investigator said, pointing to the fake auntie. "Records that show a pattern of behavior that you need to know about." The fake auntie's confident expression began to falter. "What records?" "Records that show you didn't take care of little one out of compassion," the investigator revealed. "You discovered that the biological mother was entitled to government assistance for childcare, and you illegally appropriated that benefit." "That's a lie. I have here the bank statements that prove you were receiving and diverting public money specifically intended for the care of vulnerable minors. Not just little one, but at least 4 other children in the last 5 years. The revelation hit the fake auntie like a lightning bolt. Her strategy of victimization instantly collapsed in the face of concrete evidence of systematic fraud. The social worker raised his head from his notes, his interest now directed at a completely different angle. "Madam, these are very serious allegations of fraud against social programs. I can explain everything." She tried to defend herself, but her voice no longer had the same conviction. "There's more," the investigator continued. "We discovered that you forged kinship documents with little one to get temporary custody. There was never any real family relationship between you." "And there's even more," said a new voice at the door. It was an elegant middle-aged woman, accompanied by 2 men in suits. "I am the prosecutor responsible for investigating fraud in social programs. This woman has been wanted by us for months." The situation completely reversed. The fake auntie, who minutes before seemed to be controlling the narrative, now found herself surrounded by real authorities interested in her documented crimes. "You can't do this to me," she protested, but her outrage sounded empty in the face of the evidence presented. "Actually, we can, and we will," the prosecutor replied calmly. "Fraud of public documents, misappropriation of government resources, and child neglect are serious crimes." Throughout all this time, little one watched the events with wide eyes, clinging to Alistair. It was as if she was watching the final collapse of a nightmare that had lasted for months. "Does this mean I can stay with my family?" she asked in her small voice. The social worker, who had arrived with suspicions about the family built by Alistair, now found himself facing a completely different situation than he expected. "The circumstances have changed significantly," he admitted. "I will need to reassess the entire situation based on this new information." The prosecutor addressed Alistair and little one's mother. "You will be called as witnesses in the case against this woman. Your actions to protect this child and expose her crimes are commendable." As the fake auntie was taken away by the authorities, she cast a last look of hatred at the group. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. That woman is crazy, and you'll find out the hard way." Her words echoed in the apartment even after she was gone, creating a residual tension that everyone felt but no one wanted to verbalize. The social worker put away his papers and addressed the adults. I will need a few days to process all this and draft an updated report, but preliminarily, it seems that the situation is very different from what the complaints indicated. After everyone left, the family gathered in the living room, embracing in an emotional silence. They had survived another attempt at destruction, but everyone knew that the real challenges were still to come. In the days following the fake auntie's arrest, an apparent calm settled into the life of the newly formed family. Little one smiled more often, drew new colorful birds, and seemed to be finally allowing herself to believe that her safety would not be threatened again. But this tranquility would be brutally interrupted by a discovery that no one had foreseen. Little one's mother began to exhibit strange symptoms: constant headaches, episodes of mental confusion, and moments of disorientation that did not seem related to her known psychiatric history. Initially, everyone attributed this to the stress of recent events, but when she fainted during breakfast on a Tuesday, Alistair insisted on taking her to the hospital immediately. "It's nothing serious," she protested weakly as she was helped up. "I'm just a little tired." "Mummy, are you sick?" Little one asked with that premature worry that traumatized children develop, always fearing losing the people they love. "No, my princess. Mommy just needs to rest a little." But medical tests revealed something much more serious than tiredness. The doctor called Alistair for a private conversation while little one's mother rested on a hospital cot. "The results are concerning," the doctor said, showing MRI images on a screen. "There is a significant brain lesion that appears to be the result of old physical trauma." "What kind of trauma?" "Consistent with severe assault. Repeated blows to the head that caused damage to the brain tissue. It's possible that these injuries contributed to the psychiatric episodes she experienced." The revelation was like a punch to the gut for the businessman. His fortune, accumulated through stock investments and real estate fund holdings, had never seemed so insignificant in the face of the powerlessness to undo the suffering that this family had faced. When he returned to little one's mother, she was awake and playing with her daughter, trying to maintain a smile that did not hide her growing weakness. "What did the doctors say?" she asked, as soon as little one left to get a drink of water in the hallway. "They said you need rest and more intensive medical monitoring," he lied partially, not wanting to scare her before fully understanding the situation. But she realized there was something more serious in his eyes. "It's serious, isn't it? We'll face anything together," he replied, avoiding the direct question. During the following weeks, while she underwent a battery of new tests, Alistair hired the best specialists his money could buy. Renowned neurologists, psychiatrists specialized in trauma, physical therapists. He mobilized a complete medical team to care for her. It was during one of these consultations that a shocking discovery came to light. The psychiatrist specializing in trauma, analyzing the entire medical history, made a connection that no one had realized before. The dates of the psychiatric episodes coincide perfectly with the periods in which she was being assaulted, he explained in a meeting with the medical team. These weren't primary psychotic breaks. They were traumatic reactions to severe physical assaults. "Who was assaulting her?" Alistair asked, although he feared the answer. Based on the patterns of the injuries and the chronology of the events, probably someone very close. Possibly the same person who offered to take care of the daughter when she got sick. The truth was devastating and at the same time liberating. The fake auntie had not only taken care of little one, she had systematically assaulted the biological mother until she provoked the episodes that justified her hospitalization, thus creating an opportunity to take custody of the child and appropriate the government benefits. "Does that mean my wife was never really mentally ill?" Alistair asked, using the term wife for the first time, revealing how he had begun to think of little one's mother. "She developed psychiatric symptoms secondary to physical and emotional trauma," the doctor explained. "With proper treatment for both conditions, there is a great possibility of significant recovery." The news brought hope, but also revealed the magnitude of the injustice they had suffered. Two innocent victims, mother and daughter, had been systematically abused by the same person who profited financially from their suffering. When Alistair shared these discoveries with little one's mother, she cried for hours, not out of sadness, but out of relief. "I knew there was something wrong with me," she said through tears, "but I was always told I was crazy, that I couldn't trust my own memory." "You're not crazy. You're a survivor." "And now? With these brain injuries, will I be able to be a good mother to little one? We'll figure that out together, but one thing I can guarantee, you'll never face anything alone again." It was in this moment of renewed hope that an unexpected complication arose. The prosecutor responsible for the fake auntie's case requested an urgent meeting with all of them. "We need you as key witnesses in the trial," he explained. "But there's a problem. The defense is arguing that the child's mother is not a reliable witness due to her psychiatric history." "But now we know that history was caused by the assaults," Alistair protested. "We know, but convincing a jury of that will be difficult. The defense will use any argument to discredit her testimony." The situation became even more complicated when they discovered that the fake auntie had hired a skilled lawyer, a specialist in complex criminal cases. He was building a defense based on the victimization of his client, painting her as a desperate woman who had taken on an impossible responsibility. "She will claim that she was overwhelmed caring for a mentally unstable woman and her daughter," the prosecutor explained, "and that any financial irregularities were the result of despair, not bad faith." "That's absurd," the businessman exploded. "We have evidence that she systematically assaulted little one's mother. We have medical evidence, but we don't have direct witnesses to the assaults. And the defense can argue that the brain injuries were caused by accidents during the psychiatric episodes." Alistair's frustration grew with each revelation. He had used his wealth and influence to protect that family, but now he was discovering that the legal system might fail to deliver justice for the crimes committed. It was in this tense atmosphere that little one made a revelation that changed everything. "I saw her hitting Mommy," the little girl said one night while Alistair was putting her to bed. "What did you say, little one?" "I saw the mean auntie hitting Mommy before she went to the hospital. I was hiding behind the door, and I saw everything." The businessman's heart leapt. "Are you sure of what you saw?" "I'm sure. The mean auntie was very angry and hit Mommy with a stick. Then she said that if I told anyone, she would hurt me much more." Little one's revelation was the missing piece of the puzzle. Finally, there was an eyewitness to the abuse, even if it was a 4-year-old child. But using the testimony of such a small and traumatized child would be another complex legal challenge. The system would need to be very careful to protect little one while ensuring that justice was done. "Little one," he said softly, "if important people ask you about what you saw, would you be able to tell them?" "If it's to protect my mommy and our family, I can," she replied with impressive determination for her age. That night, Alistair stayed up late, planning how to use this new information to ensure that all the injustices committed against that family were finally exposed and punished. The preparation for little one's testimony required extraordinary care. Alistair hired a child psychologist specializing in trauma to work with the little girl, ensuring that she could tell her version of events without being re-traumatized by the legal process. His investments in gold and crypto investments had never been directed towards something so delicate and important. "She's too young to fully understand the implications of what she's going to say," warned the psychologist during one of the preparatory sessions. "But it is evident that she clearly remembers the traumatic events." During these weeks, little one's mother's condition continued to deteriorate slowly. The headaches intensified, and she began to have episodes of recent memory loss, although her memories of the past remained intact. "Sometimes I forget where I put things," she confessed to Alistair one afternoon. "Or I forget if I've taken my medicine. It's getting worse, isn't it?" "The doctors said it's expected," he lied partially, not wanting to increase her anxiety. "With proper treatment, we'll be able to control the symptoms." But in private, the doctors were less optimistic. The neurologist had explained that the brain injuries were progressive and irreversible. With proper care, they could slow down the deterioration, but not prevent it completely. "She has maybe 2 or 3 years of relatively normal functionality," the specialist had said. "After that, she'll need permanent specialized care." The information devastated the businessman, but it also strengthened his determination to ensure that little one had the best family foundation possible, while her mother could still be present in her life. It was during one of these medical consultations that an unexpected discovery brought a new dimension to the case. The medical team had requested additional tests and discovered that little one's mother was not the only victim of the fake auntie's systematic assaults. "We found medical records of at least 3 other women who were treated for similar injuries," explained the medical examiner who had been called in to analyze the case. "All of them were under the care of the same woman at different times." "Where are these other victims now?" Alistair asked. "One died 2 years ago from neurological complications. Another is in a long-term psychiatric clinic. The third disappeared from the records." The magnitude of the fake auntie's crimes was much greater than anyone had imagined. These were not isolated cases of neglect, but a systematic pattern of abuse that had extended for years. These findings significantly strengthened the prosecutor's case, but also created enormous pressure on little one as a key witness. Her testimony would not only be important to seek justice for her own family, but potentially for other victims as well. The day of the trial arrived on a cold autumn morning in Chicago. Alistair had used part of his fortune to hire the best lawyers available to support the prosecution, ensuring that all legal aspects were adequately covered. Little one was nervous but determined. In the weeks of preparation, she had understood, within her childish limitations, that telling the truth about what she saw could help protect other children from going through the same suffering she had faced. "You don't need to be afraid," her mother said, hugging her before they entered the courthouse. "We're going to be right there near you." "I know, Mommy. I'm going to be brave like you taught me." The courtroom was packed. In addition to those directly involved in the case, there were journalists, representatives from child protection organizations, and family members of other possible victims of the fake auntie. When little one was called to testify, the silence in the room was absolute. She walked with small but firm steps to the special chair that had been prepared for her, with extra cushions so that she could be at the right height to speak into the microphone. "Can you tell us your name?" the prosecutor asked gently. "People call me Little One, but my mummy calls me Princess," she replied, her voice small but clear. "Little One, do you remember the woman who took care of you before you met your mommy again?" "I remember, yes. She was very mean to me." "Can you tell us how she was mean?" For the next 20 minutes, Little One told her story with impressive clarity for a child of her age. She described the assaults she suffered, the constant hunger, the nights in the damp basement, and most importantly, the assaults she witnessed against her mother. "I saw her hitting Mommy with a long stick," she said, her small hands demonstrating the size of the object. "Mommy cried and asked her to stop, but she didn't stop. Then Mommy got very hurt and had to go to the hospital." The impact of the testimony was visible throughout the room. Several people were crying openly, including some jurors who were struggling to maintain their professional composure. "Little One," the prosecutor continued, "are you sure that it was this woman who hurt your mummy?" "I'm sure. I was hiding behind the door, and I saw everything. Then she told me that if I told anyone, she would hurt me much worse." When it was the defense's turn to question Little One, the fake auntie's lawyer tried a more subtle approach, questioning the reliability of a child's memory. "Little One, sometimes children confuse dreams with real things. Are you sure it wasn't a bad dream?" "It wasn't a dream," she replied firmly. "Dreams don't leave real hurts on Mommy." The answer was devastating to the defense. Little One's childish simplicity and logic were more convincing than any complex legal argument. After Little One's testimony, other evidence was presented. Detailed medical records, statements from healthcare professionals, financial evidence of the embezzlement of government benefits. But it was during the presentation of the evidence that a final and unexpected twist shook the entire trial. Alistair's private investigator had discovered something that would completely change the course of the case. "During our most recent investigations, we found evidence that the defendant did not act alone," he announced to the court. "There are indications of a larger network of people involved in the systematic exploitation of vulnerable families." The revelation caused an uproar in the room. The fake auntie, who until then had maintained a defiant expression, visibly paled. "We found bank records showing regular transfers to accounts of at least 4 other people, all related to similar cases of misappropriation of benefits intended for at-risk minors." The prosecutor requested a recess to analyze this new evidence. During the break, the fake auntie was seen talking desperately with her lawyer, clearly trying to find a way to minimize the implications of the new discoveries. It was at this moment that she made a decision that surprised everyone. She asked to speak directly with the judge, claiming that she wanted to make a full confession in exchange for a plea deal. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling, "I admit my guilt in the crimes for which I am being accused. But I didn't act alone, and I can provide information that will lead to the dismantling of a much larger operation." The room exploded in murmurs. Alistair looked at Little One and her mother, realizing that justice was finally being done, but also that the ramifications of the case would be much greater than anyone had imagined. The fake auntie's confession would not only guarantee her conviction, but potentially save dozens of other children who were still being exploited by the same criminal network. Little One, sitting between Alistair and her mother, did not fully understand the legal implications of what was happening, but she realized that something important had changed. For the first time in her life, she felt that the bad adults were being punished by the good adults. 6 months after the trial, the family's life had found a routine that seemed finally stable. The fake auntie had been sentenced to 15 years in prison, and her revelations led to the dismantling of a network that exploited at least 20 vulnerable families in 3 different states. Little One, now 5 years old, attended a private school where she demonstrated exceptional intelligence, especially in drawing and reading. Alistair had used a significant portion of his net worth to establish a fund for other victims of the same criminal network, transforming his personal pain into a force for social good. But it was at home, watching Little One play in the garden while her mother prepared lunch, that he found the true satisfaction that all his money had never provided. However, the apparent happiness hid a painful reality that everyone avoided confronting directly. Little One's mother's neurological condition was deteriorating more rapidly than the doctors had predicted. She forgot conversations that had happened that same morning, confused the names of people close to her, and sometimes did not recognize where she was. "Is she noticing that I'm becoming different?" she asked Alistair one afternoon, during one of the rare moments of complete lucidity. "Little One is very intelligent. She notices that you have better days and worse days, but she doesn't fully understand what's happening. I'm afraid that she'll grow up remembering me as a confused and sick mother, not as the woman who fought so hard to find her again. She will remember your love. That's what matters." But the situation became drastically complicated one Tuesday morning. Little One's mother had gone out to buy bread at the bakery around the corner, a simple task she had been doing alone for months. 2 hours later, she had not returned, and Alistair began to worry. Little One, who was playing in the living room, noticed his unease. "Daddy, Where's Mommy? She said she'd be back soon. She must have met someone she knew and stopped to chat, he lied, trying to stay calm. How about we go look for her? The search lasted 3 agonizing hours. They walked all the streets in the neighborhood, visited stores, asked shopkeepers and passers-by. Finally, they received a call from the police. She had been found in a park miles away, completely disoriented and scared. She couldn't say where she lived or how she had gotten there, the officer explained. She just kept repeating that she was looking for her little daughter. When they brought her back home, little one's mother looked around as if she was seeing the apartment for the first time. For some frightening moments, she recognized neither Alistair nor her own daughter. "Where am I? Who are you?" she asked with genuine confusion and fear. Little one began to cry, not understanding why her mother was looking at her as if she were a stranger. "Mommy, it's me, your princess." It took an hour of gentle conversations and family photographs for her memory to gradually return. When she finally recognized little one, she hugged her daughter hopelessly, as if fearing to forget her again. That night, after little one fell asleep, her mother made a decision that would break the hearts of everyone involved. "I can't take care of her alone anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. "What happened today can happen again, and next time I could put her in real danger." "We won't let that happen," Alistair promised. "I'll hire specialized caregivers, private nurses, anything that's needed. It's not a matter of money, it's a matter of reality. My condition will worsen, and little one can't grow up fearing that her mother will disappear or not recognize her." The conversation stretched into the early hours of the morning, both fighting an inevitable reality that neither wanted to accept. "I want you to officially become her legal father," she said finally. "Not just the temporary guardian, but the full father, with all the rights and responsibilities. It would mean that if I become completely incapacitated, she would have a father who can make all the necessary decisions without legal bureaucracy. It means that she would have real stability, not depending on the state of my mental health." The proposal was both a gift and a farewell. She was officially transferring her greatest responsibility and greatest joy to someone she trusted completely. In the weeks that followed, the adoption papers were prepared with meticulous care. Alistair used his best lawyers to ensure that all legal aspects were properly handled, protecting both little one's rights and respecting the will of her biological mother. During this period, they created a special ritual. Every night, little one's mother told stories about her own childhood, about the dreams she had for her daughter, about the life lessons she considered most important. It was her way of ensuring that even when her memory failed completely, part of her essence would remain alive in the child. "Princess," she said on one of those nights, "no matter what happens to me, I want you to remember one thing. You were wanted and loved from the first moment I knew you existed inside me. I'll remember, Mommy, and I'll take care of Daddy too, like he took care of us." Little one's precocious wisdom continued to impress everyone around her. At 5 years old, she had developed extraordinary emotional maturity, a result of the adversities she had faced, but tempered by the love she now received. The day of the final signing of the adoption papers was a bittersweet moment. Legally, Alistair became little one's official father, but everyone knew that this also marked the formal recognition that the biological mother could no longer fully exercise her motherhood. "Now you are truly father and daughter on paper too," she said, hugging both of them tightly. "But in your hearts, you were already family a long time ago." Little one held the hands of the 2 most important adults in her life. "Now I have 2 parents, the daddy who chose to love me and the mommy who never stopped loving me even when she was sick." That night, while little one slept peacefully in her room decorated with drawings of colorful birds, Alistair and her mother talked about the future. "Are you going to tell her the truth about my condition when she's older?" she asked. I'm going to tell her that her mother fought against a terrible disease to be with her, and that even when the disease was winning, she used all the love she had left to make sure she had a safe family. And what about you? How will you explain why a rich man decided to adopt a girl from the street? I'm going to tell her that sometimes people meet exactly when they need each other most. That you and little one taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with money, stocks, or gold investments. It's about having someone to love and someone who loves us back. But even in this moment of apparent resolution, one last complication was approaching. A complication that would test all the bonds they had built and force decisions that no one was prepared to make. The phone rang at 2 in the morning, bringing news that would change everything once again. The call at 2 in the morning was from the hospital. Little one's mother had suffered a severe seizure during her sleep and was undergoing emergency tests. Alistair woke little one gently, dressed her quickly, and they drove together to the hospital in a desperate race against time. "Daddy, is Mommy going to be okay?" Little one asked in the car, her small voice revealing the fear she was trying to hide. "The doctors are going to take very good care of her," he replied, trying to sound more confident than he actually felt. At the hospital, the doctors explained that the seizures were the result of the progression of the brain injuries. The damaged tissue was causing increasingly frequent and severe neurological episodes. "We will need to consider permanent specialized care," said the neurologist in a private conversation. "She can no longer live alone, not even with partial supervision." What does that mean exactly? It means a clinic specializing in long-term neurological care, a place where she will have 24-hour medical assistance. The news hit Alistair like a physical blow. Despite knowing that this moment would come, he was not prepared for the reality of having to separate little one from her mother permanently. When little one's mother woke up, hours later, she was confused and disoriented. She did not immediately recognize where she was, and it took a few minutes to remember the events that had brought her to the hospital. "Where is my princess?" were her first coherent words. "She's here with me," said Alistair, bringing little one close to the bed. When she saw her daughter, her eyes filled with tears. It was as if she knew intuitively that this might be one of the last moments of complete lucidity they would have together. "My beautiful princess," she murmured, caressing the girl's face. "Mommy loves you so much, loves you more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Mommy. Are you going to get better soon?" The child's innocent question made the hearts of everyone present clench. How to explain to a 5-year-old girl that her mother was saying goodbye forever? "Mommy is going to a place where the doctors will take very good care of her," said the mother, with a strength that came from somewhere deep within her being. "But you will stay with Daddy, who loves you as much as I do. Can I visit you in that place?" "Yes, my princess, whenever you want." In the following days, the goodbyes were gradual and painful. Little one's mother had a few more episodes of lucidity, which she used to record video messages for her daughter, telling stories, singing lullabies, and repeating countless times how much she loved her. "I want her to have these recordings for when she's older," she explained to Alistair during one of the most lucid moments, "so that she never doubts that she was loved unconditionally." Alistair had used part of his fortune to ensure that she was admitted to the best neurological clinic in the region, a place where she would receive dignified and specialized care. His investments in real estate funds and treasury bonds finally had a purpose that transcended the mere accumulation of wealth. On the last day before the transfer to the clinic, something extraordinary happened. Little one's mother had a moment of complete mental clarity, as if her brain was gathering all its strength for a final farewell. "Little one," she called, "come here, my princess." The girl approached the bed, and her mother held her little hands with infinite tenderness. "Mommy is going to tell you a very important secret," she said, her voice clear and firm. "You were the greatest gift that life gave me. Every day I spent taking care of you was the happiest day of my life, even on the difficult days, Mommy, especially on the difficult days, because that's when I discovered that a mother's love is stronger than any pain, any fear, any disease. Little one listened attentively, somehow realizing that those words were special, that they needed to be kept in her heart forever. "And now you have the best daddy in the world," continued the mother, looking at Alistair with infinite gratitude. "A man who didn't need to love you, but chose to love you. That is the purest love there is." "I know, Mommy. Daddy taught me to read, buys me books, and always listens to me when I'm sad." "Then promise, Mommy, that you will always be a good girl, will study hard, and will remember that you are special." "I promise, Mommy." That night, after little one fell asleep, her mother had a final conversation with Alistair. "Thank you for giving me back my daughter," she said. "And thank you for giving me the chance to be a real mother, even if only for a short time." "Thank you for teaching me what really matters in life," he replied. "You and little one transformed a bitter and lonely man into a person capable of loving again. Take good care of her, and when she grows up and has her own daughters, tell her how brave her mother was who fought so hard to find her." "I will tell her. And I will make sure she knows that her mother's love never disappears, even when her mother can no longer be physically present." The next morning, the transfer to the clinic was done with as much care as possible. Little one said goodbye to her mother with tears in her eyes, but also with impressive maturity. "Goodbye, Mommy. I'll draw pretty birds for you every day," she said, hugging her for the last time at home. "And I'll dream about you every night, my princess." As the ambulance drove away, little one firmly held the hand of Alistair, now officially her father in every sense. "Daddy," she said, "is Mommy going to be sad alone in that place?" "She won't be alone. The doctors and nurses will take very good care of her. And she will carry the love for you in her heart, always, and we will visit her whenever you want." At that moment, standing on the sidewalk watching the ambulance disappear around the corner, father and adopted daughter began a new chapter in their lives. A chapter built on the solid foundation of unconditional love, of overcoming terrible adversities, and of the understanding that family is not defined only by blood, but by choice, dedication, and mutual care. Little one looked up at the man who had changed her life completely. "Daddy, do you think my story will have a happy ending?" He knelt down to be at her height, wiped her tears carefully, and smiled with a tenderness he never knew he possessed. "Your story is just beginning, my daughter. And I will do everything to ensure that it is the most beautiful story of love and courage that has ever been told." As they walked back home, little one began to hum a song that her mother had taught her, about birds that fly freely through the sky. For the first time since they had met, Alistair realized that they had both finally found the freedom they had always sought, not the freedom to run away from problems, but the freedom to love and be loved without reservations. 5 years had passed since that painful farewell at the hospital. Little one, now 10 years old, had transformed into a bright and confident girl with excellent grades at the private school where she studied. Her drawings of birds still decorated the walls of Alistair's office, but now they portrayed majestic creatures flying freely through the skies, no longer the sad, trapped birds of her traumatic childhood. Alistair, who had never imagined being a father, found himself being the best father his circumstances allowed. He had significantly reduced his work hours, delegated business responsibilities to competent managers, and directed his fortune accumulated through stocks and Bitcoin investments to ensure little one's educational and emotional future. The visits to her mother at the neurological clinic had become a monthly ritual. Although she rarely recognized little one completely, there were moments of inexplicable connection where she seemed to remember the love that united them. In those moments, her eyes shone with a special light, and she caressed her daughter's face with a tenderness that transcended conscious memory. "She still loves me," even without really remembering who I am," commented little one on one of those visits, demonstrating impressive emotional wisdom for her age. "True love doesn't need memory to exist," replied Alistair, observing the interaction between mother and daughter with contained emotion. During these years, they had built a solid and affectionate family life. The businessman discovered simple joys that his wealth had never provided, helping little one with her homework, taking her for walks in the park, listening to her stories from school, comforting her when she had nightmares about her traumatic past. Little one, in turn, brought light and purpose to the life of a man who had lost hope after the departure of his wife. She had taught him to laugh again, to see beauty in small things, to understand that true success was not measured in dividends or profits, but in the ability to make a difference in someone's life. It was on a Saturday morning, while they were having breakfast together in the garden of the house they had bought in a quiet neighborhood, that an unexpected discovery changed their lives once again, this time, however, for the better. The phone rang, and the voice on the other end was from the director of the clinic where little one's mother was hospitalized. "We have very important news about the lady under our care," he said, his voice laden with contained professional excitement. "We would like you to come here today, if possible." "Has something serious happened?" Alistair asked, immediately worried. "On the contrary, something extraordinary has happened." An hour later, father and daughter were sitting in the medical director's office, listening to an explanation that seemed impossible. "In recent months, we have observed a significant improvement in your mother's neurological condition," the doctor explained. "The brain lesions that were causing her mental deterioration seemed to be stabilizing, and in some cases, even regenerating." "How is that possible?" the businessman asked, incredulous. "We discovered that part of the damage we attributed to permanent physical injuries was actually the result of inadequate medication during the early psychiatric treatments. When we completely adjusted her medication and introduced new therapies, her brain began to recover." Little one held her father's hand, her eyes shining with cautious hope. "Does that mean Mommy can get better?" "It means she's already getting better. In the last 15 days, she has demonstrated increasingly longer periods of lucidity. Yesterday, for the first time in 5 years, she remembered you perfectly and asked when she could see you." The emotion that took over the two was overwhelming. Tears of joy streamed down the faces of father and daughter, who hugged in a mixture of relief and uncontrollable happiness. "Can I see her now?" asked little one, barely able to contain her anxiety. "Actually, she's waiting for you. She has something very specific she wants to say." When they entered the clinic room, they found a woman who looked completely different from the one they had left 5 years ago. Her eyes were clear and focused. Her posture was more upright, and when she saw little one, her face lit up with a radiant and completely lucid smile. "My princess," she said, extending her arms, "how you've grown! How beautiful you are!" Little one ran into her mother's arms, and the reunion was as intense as that first hug in the hospital years ago, but this time there was no shadow of mental illness hanging over them. "Mommy, are you really better? Will you remember me always now?" "I will remember you forever, my daughter, and I will never leave you again." The businessman watched the scene with a complex mixture of joy and apprehension. He was genuinely happy for the recovery of little one's mother, but he also feared that this meant the end of the family they had built together. As if reading his thoughts, little one's mother looked directly at him. "You saved our family," she said, her voice filled with deep gratitude, "not just once, but twice. First when you reunited us, and then when you ensured that little one had a loving father when I couldn't be the mother she needed." "I only did what anyone should do," he replied, emotional. "No, you did much more than that. You chose to love a child who wasn't your responsibility. You chose to take care of a family that wasn't your obligation. That's what defines a true man." Little one looked alternately at the two most important adults in her life and then asked the question that was in everyone's hearts. Now that Mummy is okay, will our family stay together? The question hung in the air for a few tense seconds until Little One's mother responded with a proposal that surprised everyone. Little One, you have two parents now, one who brought you into the world and another who chose to love you. I don't see why that needs to change. What do you mean? Asked Alistair. I am proposing that we form an unconventional but real family. You continue to be her legal father, and I go back to being the present mother. We raise together this extraordinary girl that we both love more than life. The proposal was bold and non-traditional, but it made perfect sense for people who had faced extraordinary circumstances. That would mean that you two would be my parents forever? Asked Little One, barely able to believe the possibility. Forever, confirmed the two adults simultaneously. 3 months later, in a simple but deeply meaningful ceremony, Alistair and Little One's mother were married not for traditional romantic passion, but for something deeper, a shared love for a child who had changed both their lives and a mutual recognition that they had become family through the adversities faced together. Little One was the bridesmaid, radiant in a white dress decorated with embroidered birds, a tribute to the drawings she had made throughout her childhood. Now we are a real family on paper too, she said during the party, holding the hands of both parents. We've always been a real family, corrected Alistair, now her legal father and stepfather in heart. It just took a while for the world to recognize what our hearts already knew. That night, while Little One slept peacefully in her room in a house where she felt completely safe and loved, her parents talked about the future. Thank you for never giving up on us, she said. Thank you for teaching me that true wealth has nothing to do with money, he replied. It has to do with having people to love and people who love us back. 5 years later, Little One, now 15 years old, wrote in her diary about the extraordinary family she had gained through circumstances that began with so much pain but ended with so much love. Today I understand, she wrote, that sometimes the best families are not those we are born into, but those we choose to build. My father chose to love me when no one else cared about me. My mother fought against a terrible illness to come back to me, and I chose to open my heart to both, even after being hurt by so many adults before them. I learned that true love is not just about the happy moments, it's about choosing to stay together during the tough times too. It's about people who see the best in you, even when you can't see it in yourself. My story began on the streets of Chicago, shining shoes for a few bucks. But that's not where it really began. It was the moment a good man decided to stop and really see me. It was when a brave mother fought to come back to me. It was when we all chose to be family. And now, whenever I see birds flying freely through the sky, I remember that all of us, me, Daddy and Mommy, learned to fly together. Not to run away from problems, but to rise above them, as a family that nothing can separate. The bird that had once been trapped had finally learned to fly and had taught 2 wounded adults to fly along with her toward a future filled with love, hope, and infinite possibilities.